Okay friends, you're going to notice that more than likely you're going to have debris on top of the engine. Let's go ahead and spray that off with some compressed air. Now that we have that blown off, let's continue on by removing our ignition coils. You're going to have 4 of them on the passenger side. I'm just going to go ahead and grab onto the wiring. There's a little tab where my index finger is going to be. Squeeze on that, lift this up. Always check every electrical connector for any funny colors. This one looks great, so we'll set it aside. Next, we're going to remove our ignition coil mounting bolt. And remove the coil. Give it a little twist. With the ignition coil out, just make sure you inspect the boot. If it seems as though it's damaged or firm in any way, go ahead and replace the boot with the internal spring as well. Now let's just do the same to the rest. All right, now with this out of here, let's go ahead and put it in a spot where we can remember which cylinder it was in. That way there, when we reinstall them, they'll go back into the original cylinder. Next, we're going to remove the vapor line from the valve cover, but before we do that, follow it up to the intake area. We'll grab this tab, give it a little pull it right off of there. Now let's remove this lower one, push on the little tab, give it a little twist, draw it right up and out of there. We're going to set this aside. Remember that the side with the sticker on it was the lower aspect. Now let's go ahead and get this off of the valve cover. Next, let's go ahead and disconnect our fuel injectors. There we are. Let's go ahead and grab onto this wiring. I'm just going to separate these 2 pieces here. We'll give this a little flip. Looking at it from this side, you can see there's an area that you can get under with your screwdriver. Lift up right there and separate these 2 wires. Now we need to unsecure the wiring from the valve cover. You're going to notice there's one up front here. And give that a little tug. It just kind of presses in there. And then as you move down along the valve cover, moving the wires around, you'll probably be able to feel some more. Go ahead and disconnect all of them. Let's remove our oil cap, and then we're going to remove our 8 mounting bolts for our valve cover. There's one. Do the same to all the rest. Now that we did the top 4 bolts, let's go ahead and get those bottom 4. Now that we have all those mounting bolts loose, let's take this wiring, bring it right up and over this. Now with a rubber mallet, let's give this a couple loving bonks and try to break it free. Let's continue on by relieving more of these mounting areas here. We want to disattach these 2 wiring harnesses from each other. That's going to give us some extra slack. And then if you follow this back along the back, you're going to find another area where it's onto the bracket. Let's go ahead and get it off of there as well. That way there we can move this wiring out of the way. Let's get our air intake system out of the way here. You're going to find that there's a clamp on this side. Loosen that. Loosen this clamp. Set this aside. Now we're just going to wiggle this around so we can weasel it out of here. There it is, friends. Now that we have the valve cover out of the way, we have a clear view of the next area that we need to remove, which is this mounting bolt right here. You want to be very careful not to drop this into the engine. That'll, of course, be a major issue. There it is, friends. Let's go ahead and clean down this area right here. All right, friends, now it's going to be time to install our new solenoid. Let's put the bolt right inside the hole so it's started. Get this down into the hole in the engine, nice and easy. Start in that bolt, and then we'll snug it up, torque it to 44 inch-pounds. There it is. Now let's get our valve cover over on the bench so we can strip it down. We're going to continue on by removing our valve cover gasket. And honestly, it only makes sense to go ahead and replace that every time that you remove the valve cover. We'll set that aside. At this point, you can see where the solenoid gasket's going to be. We want to go ahead and push that out of there, and then of course we'll reinstall a new one. There's our seal, friends. Now that the gasket's out of the way, let's continue on by scraping out any of the debris that might be stuck inside this hole. Let's hit it with some parts cleaner. And wipe out any of the crud that's stuck inside there. So now it's going to be time to install your new gasket. No, this one isn't the new gasket, but I did want to show you how to install a new one. Essentially what you want to do is take a little bit of motor oil and just go around the outer aspect of the seal. This is going to help lubricate it so you can install it. Let's go ahead and put this into the hole. Try to start it in so it's nice and flat. Now we're just going to drive this straight down. Essentially you want it so it's nice and flat coming around the valve cover. That looks good right there. A couple things to think about before we go ahead and reinstall the valve cover onto the engine is you're going to have a little bit of crud inside here. Any of this that you want to get out of the way before you reinstall is probably a good idea. Aside from that, we need to make sure that we clean the area where that seal is going to go. If you were to use a nice flat razor blade and just come along the edging here, that's going to help make sure that you get off all the crud that might be located on there. And then of course, make sure you get inside of the grooved area to get out any of the crud that might be in there as well. After that, go ahead and replace your valve cover gasket with a new one because you never want to reuse your old one. And then we'll get ready for our install. Now it's going to be time to get our valve cover gasket on here. Pay special attention to these areas that look like this. There should be 2 of them on your gasket. You want to make sure that those line up with the areas on your valve cover. Let's set this up in here. Just kind of work its way all the way around. Make sure everything lines up perfectly with these little nubs. As you go around, just make sure that you press it all the way into the valve cover as far as it can go so there's no way that it can fall out, and then we'll continue. Perfect. All right, now let's go over to the vehicle. Back over at the engine, we need to make sure we clean down the mating surface where the gasket's going to ride. I like to tuck a nice rag inside here to try to collect as much of the debris as possible. But mainly what we want to do is just try to carefully scrape around this area here and get off any of the debris or buildup that's on it. There's going to be 2 areas on each of your valve covers that you're going to want to pay special attention to. There's one area right here that's going to have some black RTV or gasket maker on there. We want to make sure we get that off. And then on the lower side in the same exact spot. So right here, except right down over there. We're going to make sure we get those clean and clear. We'll go ahead and scrape down the rest of it. Just be careful not to mar up the metal on the actual engine. Once it's clean, we'll continue on. As we're scraping this, we want to make sure that we scrape away from the inside portion of the engine. Let's try to keep out as much of this debris as possible. So now that we have the area where the valve cover gasket's going to ride nice and clean, we want to make sure that we coat this area, and of course the area that was down there that we cleaned as well, with a little bit of RTV or gasket maker. That's going to help ensure that this little ridge right here is going to be nice and sealed for when we get the actual gasket on there as well. Before we install our valve cover, let's use a tiny bit of engine oil along the inside of this seal right here. That's where that VVT sensor is going to go. We want to make sure that it's nice and lubricated. Okay, so now that we have the valve cover into this area, let's continue on with that RTV on our 2 areas that I told you about. Right here, put a nice coating, and then of course the bottom side as well. All right, with both those spots nice and coated with RTV, let's carefully put our sensor through our seal here, and then we'll set our valve cover down into its resting area. Carefully start in all of your bolts. We're just going to bottom them out, and then we'll torque them to manufacturer specifications. Now, as you go to start snugging these up, what you want to do is you want to make sure you start from the center bolts, go up top, down bottom, and then work your way out towards the front and towards the rear. As you do this, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now let's torque these to 89 inch-pounds. All right, now it's going to be time to get our ignition coils back in here. I like to use a little bit of dielectric grease right on the boot here. That's the area that's going to go onto the spark plug. Let's go ahead and start that into the engine here. Push it down onto the spark plug so it's completely down. Start in your coil bolt, and then we'll snug it up. All right, once you have that bottomed out, torque it to 53 inch-pounds. There we are. Let's continue on and install all the rest of our ignition coils. All right, now that we have those ignition coils in and torqued, let's go ahead and secure our wiring harness. Go ahead and push all your tabs into the valve cover or the corresponding areas where they need to be connected into to be secured. I'm just going to go right down the line here and do them all. Let's get this white clip into here. Perfect. Okay. All these look good. All right, now at this point, let's start connecting in our wiring. We had our little gray wire. Let's connect that back in. Listen for the click. Of course, that goes back into here, so it's nice and secured. It can't dangle around. Let's get this clip in here. There we are. Now it's going to be time to connect in the rest of our connectors. You're going to notice you have grays and blacks. The grays are going to go to your fuel injectors, and the blacks are going to go to the actual coils themselves. So I'm just going to go ahead and connect this in. Listen for a click, give it a nice tug. And do the same here for our fuel injector. Listen for a click, nice little tug. Do the same right down the line. Okay, so we have all of our connectors in. Just give it a quick double check just to make sure everything's completely plugged in. Once you're sure everything's in, let's continue on by reconnecting this vapor line here. We remember the sticker was down in the downward position. This is going to come right under here like this. I'm going to slide this down and on this. Should click right in, give it a nice tug. Right up top here. Push on the tab. There we are. Now it's time to get our air intake back on here. Slide it on there. Slide it on this side. You want to make sure that it's completely bottomed out and straight as can be. Snug up that clamp. Do the same to this side. Okay, nice and tight. All right, now it's going to be time to get the oil cap back on there. But one thing I like to mention before we go ahead and do that is it's a good idea to go ahead and do the oil change. The reason why you'd want to do an oil change is due to any of the debris that might have fallen into the valve cover area in the engine. By doing an oil change, it pretty much ensures that you're going to get out the majority of it. Okay friends, after you've gotten that oil change done, go ahead and start up the truck. You want to make sure that you don't have a check engine light on. Assuming there's no check engine light, take it for a road test.